Okay, this is on plant responses. There are actually two parts of this particular section, and that is how plants respond and how animals respond. How animals respond, we're really going to focus on the immune system. How plants respond is really not that much unlike our immune system, believe it or not. Plants are actually pretty cool. When we look at a plant, we think, well, that plant doesn't do anything; it's just sitting there, and it's not doing anything. But plants are actually doing a lot of things that we don't realize that they're doing. If you want more information, this is chapter 39.5 of your textbook. Through natural selection, that should not be say though, that should say through natural selection, plants have evolved many types of interactions with other species in their community. You think, yeah, right, plants don't interact with anything, but they do actually. Most interactions are not beneficial to the plant. Plants have evolved defense systems to counter these threats. So because plants aren't mobile, they are very, very subject to attack. But they have evolved some defense systems to help with those threats. Let's look at some. Plants prevent excessive herbivory, well, that means being eaten, by a couple different things. One, they have physical defenses, and two, they have chemical defenses. And you're going to write a paper, you're going to pick a particular plant, and you're going to look at either a physical or a chemical defense and write about it. So, for example, a physical defense could be a thorn. Okay, it's going to make it a little bit harder for a predator to eat it because it's not very comfy. Um, and the other thing is they can produce toxic compounds that are emitted that will harm the organism that's trying to eat it. Some plants even recruit predatory animals to help defend against their herbivores. For example, wasps inject eggs into caterpillars feeding on the plants. The eggs hatch inside the caterpillars, um, and then the larvae eat the caterpillars from inside out. Okay, uh, so that's kind of a gross example, but there are examples like that. They actually recruit them. We'll look at how they do that here in a second. So first example is first part that happening is the caterpillar is eating the plant, so that's causing wounding to the plant. And there's a chemical in their saliva that's also hurting the plant, and that's going to create a signal transduction pathway. You remember when we talked about in chapter 11 that you have your signal transduction pathway, which is part of the cell communication. You have a stimulus, and then you have a response. Um, and somewhere in there, there is a signal transduction pathway of what is going to occur as the cell is sending signals in order to get some kind of a response. Uh, woo. So then the next thing that's going to happen is in this signal transduction pathway, the plant is actually going to synthesize and release a volatile chemical that attracts wasps. And the wasps are going to come and they're going to lay their eggs within the caterpillars. And then the larvae are going to hatch. That's what these little red dots are. Those larvae are going to hatch and basically eat the caterpillar from the inside out. Gross. But that is a cool way that plants are actually interacting and they have created defense against these caterpillars. The first line of defense for plants is their epidermis. That's actually the outside layer of the plant body. It's kind of like human skin. That's our first defense. But chemical wounding of this layer can open up the plant to pathogens, not really unlike us. If a pathogen enters the plant, and yes, there are pathogens that affect plants specifically, the plant mounts a second line of defense, a chemical attack that destroys the pathogen and prevents its spread from the site of infection. Does that sound familiar? Well, obviously it sounds familiar. That's a lot like what we do. When a pathogen or a bacteria or a virus gets in us, the first thing our body does is mounts an attack on it. So if you look at a plant, you look at the stem, and it doesn't look like a lot, but if you really get up to it, there are multiple layers to that plant stem. And that outside layer is basically like our skin. It's basically skin. And that's what's going to keep it as an external barrier from most pathogens most of the time. Now, if something comes and eats it, that's going to break down that external pathogen or that external defense. Even without mechanical wounding, pathogens can enter through natural openings. For example, stomata. Now, again, does that sound familiar? Yes. Even if we don't break our skin, we can still get pathogens. We can take them in through our mouth, our nose. Sexually transmitted diseases can be taken through other openings, but there are openings that are exposed to the external environment. And so our skin, although it's a good line of defense, it's not the only way that a pathogen can get in, and the same thing with a plant. Um, I feel like I went too far. No. This is talking about host pathogen coevolution. Pathogens against which the plant has little specific defense are virulent pathogens. They don't really have much they can do about virulent pathogens, kind of like viruses. Pathogens that mildly harm or do not kill the plant are said to be avirulent. So virulent here doesn't necessarily mean viruses. It just means virulent means they are harmful, and avirulent means that they are not. A compromise has evolved in which pathogens gain enough access to its host to enable it to perpetuate itself without severely damaging or killing the plant. A defense response that causes cell and tissue death near the infection site and therefore restricting the spread of the pathogen. So near the infection site, restricting the spread. That's the goal. So here we go. For some reason, we have a pathogen that is entered into this plant. Okay. And it's caused a response, a hypersensitive response, showing that it's been infected, kind of like you would get like a rash or hives or something like that. There's a signal transduction pathway, so that the cells of the plant cell are actually sending signals. That's getting this response. You notice kind of the light-colored areas here. The signal is sent to other parts of the plant, and then they're going to have resistance. So it's basically keeping that pathogen into one area. It's blocking off and resisting that pathogen in other areas of the plant. Systemic acquired resistance. Pathogen invasions can also produce signaling molecules that sound the alarm of infection to the whole plant. Resulting systemic acquired resistance arises from the plant-wide expression of defense genes. Okay, same thing. This is going to be your hypersensitive response, showing useful response. This is your systemic acquired resistance. This is where it's sending signals to the rest of the plant so that they can activate their defense and it won't spread. And that's all I have for you on plant responses. You'll get to research it out. It'll be quite good.